Hey everybody, this is Nick from Twisted Wrister Hockey, and in today's video I'm going to talk about who I think are some of the best players who were born in the Western United States. So there aren't that many NHL players who were born or grew up in the Western United States, and I'm talking about California, Texas, Colorado, Pacific Northwest, Alaska. So there aren't that many players, but I've found several good ones who are playing in the NHL today. So what I've done here is I've assembled my all-star team for NHL players who were born in the Western United States. They didn't necessarily grow up here. They didn't necessarily play hockey here. Some of them played on the East Coast. Others went to Canada. But again, it's about where they were born, and it's just kind of interesting to see where different players come from. I actually have a first team and a second team, and these are all current NHL players who have played at least 100 games. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Again, I'm here to create content about hockey that's a little bit more slanted for American audiences, particularly those in the Western states. I don't think that there's enough coverage of that on YouTube and otherwise, and so hopefully I can attract some people who are interested in topics related to that. So let's take a look at my first team, and then we'll take a look at my second team. We'll start at goaltender, and so I've chosen Ben Bishop. He was the clear favorite. Ben Bishop, he plays for the Dallas Stars, and he was born in Denver, Colorado. So he really is the only goalie on this list from the Western U.S. to have amassed enough playing time to really qualify for this. At center, I'm sure that many people were already thinking this, but I have Austin Matthews of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, Austin Matthews was actually born in California. He was born in San Ramon in the Bay Area, but shortly after his family moved to the Phoenix area, I believe to Scottsdale, so he actually grew up playing hockey in the Phoenix area, which is crazy because Phoenix is the hottest city in the United States. To his left wing, we have Jason Zucker, who was born in Newport Beach, California. He plays for the Wild. At right wing, well, I've kind of cheated here because, look, Austin Matthews is a great example of growing up in a non-traditional hockey market and succeeding. So what I've done is I've actually taken Sean Couturier, who is typically a center, and I've put him on the right wing. Sean Couturier is Canadian by his nationality, but he was born in Phoenix, Arizona. On left defense, I've selected Jacob Slavin. He is from Denver, Colorado, and he's currently playing for the Carolina Hurricanes. We don't really hear too much about the Hurricanes, so it's kind of nice to see one of their players make it in here. He put up over 30 points this year, so that's pretty good, and he's a fairly young talent. And then on right defense, this was a no-brainer. Seth Jones of the Columbus Blue Jackets. He's from Arlington, Texas, and he is rapidly climbing up the rankings among defensemen. You could say he's one of the best 10 defensemen in the game today. So I actually wanted to share a little bit about the overall performance of this last season from this team right here. So we'll talk about points, goals, plus minus, power play points, and power play goals. So between these 5 players, because I'm not counting the goaltender here, these guys put up 290 combined points. And remember, when I put these numbers out there, do take into consideration that Austin Matthews missed, I think he missed 18 games this year. So yeah, 290 points combined, 122 goals combined, a plus minus combined of 78, so that's very strong. Austin Matthews had a plus 25, and Couturier had a plus 34 on the year. He is in the Selke running this year. Combined power play points, 77. Power play goals, 30. And so Seth Jones had 7 power play goals for the Blue Jackets. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to name my second team, and then we're going to kind of compare the numbers between the first team and the second team. There wasn't really a second Western U.S. born goaltender who had played a lot in the NHL recently. So what I've done is I've selected a guy who he technically played in a game this year, and there's a chance that he could play a little bit next year because the Vancouver Canucks goaltending situation is a little questionable right now. So I selected Thatcher Demko. He's from San Diego, California. At center, this was actually a very competitive position because As I'll share later on in the video, there were a couple of other really good centers who missed the mark. Just by a hair, I chose Tyler Johnson from the Tampa Bay Lightning. Tyler Johnson is from Spokane, Washington, and although Seattle is the next destination for an NHL team, probably an expansion team, Spokane, which is in eastern Washington, is actually kind of a hockey hotbed. I found several other players originating from Spokane. It's definitely colder there in the winters, and it just lends itself better to a hockey environment. At left wing, I have selected the somewhat of an agitator, Matthew Tkachuk. Now, Matthew Tkachuk is the son of American great Keith Tkachuk, and he is from Scottsdale because his father was playing for the Coyotes organization. At right wing, I've selected TJ Oshie from Everett, Washington. So Everett's in the Seattle area. And as you know, TJ Oshie has already made his mark as an American hockey player, particularly in the 2014 Olympics when he scored a ton of shootout goals against Russia. He's one of my favorite players. Left defense was tough because I didn't really find anybody else who had played a full season at that position out of the players who were remaining. So I've chosen Brooks Orpik of the Washington Capitals. He's from San Francisco, California. And on right defense, again, this was kind of a competitive position, but because in these rankings I'm going more for players who had put up some points, I decided to select Tyler Myers, who plays for the Winnipeg Jets, and he's from Houston, Texas. So it's really interesting looking through this list and just finding these towns that you would not associate with hockey. And yeah, they've produced some fairly good players. Now, we're going to look at the statistics for these guys, and I'll compare that a little bit to that first team that I was talking about earlier. So combined points, we had 192. Now that's nearly 100 points fewer than the first team. Goals, 69 goals. That is just a little bit more than half of what the first team produced. The first team produced 122. This is the one that jumps out the most. So plus minus. For the first team, I said 78, and here the plus minus combined is 4. That's crazy. So Tyler Myers had the highest plus minus out of these 5. He had a plus 9. And there were a couple of other defensemen that I was thinking of considering who had higher plus minuses, but even then it wasn't going to make up for, Brooks Orpik had a minus 9. Power play points, we're at 61 for that. So the first team had 77, so 61, it's a little bit of a drop-off, but not by much. 17 power play points by Tyler Myers. And power play goals, 19, compared to the 30 for the first team. So again, like I said at the beginning of this video, there aren't that many high-quality players who come out of the Western United States. There's a really good starting 5, but after that, there's a considerable drop-off. I also want to share a little bit about some other Western US-born players who I thought about putting on this list, but just didn't quite make it. I think the big one that stands out is now 2-time Cup champion Jake Guentzel of the Pittsburgh Penguins. He's from Omaha, Nebraska, and he was the only Nebraskan player in the NHL currently. I wanted to put Guentzel ahead of Tyler Johnson, but the minus 9 on the season from Guentzel was, that kind of did him in. Another guy who could have made this list as well is Brandon Dubinsky of the Columbus Blue Jackets. He's from Anchorage, Alaska. So Anchorage is a little bit of a small hockey community, but for its population, it produces a fair amount of talent. And let's see, right defenseman. So I went with Tyler Myers because he had the numbers. He had, I think, 36 points on the year. But I had also considered Kevin Miller and Brandon Carlo. Both of them are defensemen of the Boston Bruins. So Kevin Miller was born in Los Angeles, California. Brandon Carlo was born in Colorado Springs, Colorado. From Utah, we have Trevor Lewis. He's from Salt Lake City, and he's won 2 Stanley Cups with the Los Angeles Kings, both in 2012 and 2014. So yeah, that's about it for this video on Western American-born hockey players. I hope that you found this interesting. And in the comments here, let me know, do you root for any players from your hometown area, even if they're not on your current team? For example, I could have chosen Austin Matthews because he was born about 40 minutes away from me. But yeah, I don't really have too many other players to root for in my area, but maybe it's different for you. Anyway, I'd be curious to see where you guys are coming from and who some of your favorite players are if they're from your hometown. And hopefully you'll stick around for future videos that I'll be uploading here on YouTube. Again, this has been Nick from Twisted Wrister Hockey, and I will see you soon.